It is the middle of July. You walk out to the tomato patch behind the kitchen and the plants are taller than the children. Thick, dark green, leafy, every direction full of stem and shoot and leaf. You have been watering them, weeding around them, staking them up against the heavy summer storms. The plants look healthy. They look like they are thriving, and then you look for the tomatoes. There are a few small green ones scattered through the deep shade of the inner canopy. A dozen, maybe 2 dozen on a plant that should give you 50. And the lower leaves are starting to spot. Small brown circles with yellow halos. The unmistakable signs of septoria leaf spot, or early blight that creeps up from the soil and works its way to the top, stealing the leaves the plant needs and killing the fruit before it ripens. You walk back to the porch and you wonder what you did wrong. The plants looked so promising in June. You did everything right. Good soil, good seed, regular water, sturdy cages. Why are they full of leaves and short on tomatoes? Why is the disease creeping in even though you have been careful? The answer is one you can hardly believe because it sounds backward. You needed to take more off the plant, not give it more. Now I want you to sit with this. A tomato plant left to grow the way nature designed it does not give you the heavy harvest you are hoping for. It gives you a beautiful green bush, 100 little side shoots, a tangled inner canopy, and a moderate amount of fruit hidden in the middle where the sun cannot reach it. The plant is trying to spread, to survive, to reproduce, and it does that by growing in every direction at once. But the gardener who knows the old way does something the plant on its own would never do. He takes off the side shoots before they grow into competing branches. He removes the lower leaves before the soil splashes disease onto them. He tops the plant at the end of the season, so its last energy goes to ripening fruit instead of putting out new growth that will freeze. And in doing those small, careful things, he turns a 30 RLEB plant into a 60 RLEB plant. Same seed, same soil, same water. Half again as much fruit ripened earlier, with far fewer disease problems. This is one of the oldest pieces of kitchen garden knowledge in the Pennsylvania Dutch country. My mother knew it. My grandmother knew it. Every farmer's wife with a serious tomato patch in Lancaster County for the last 100 years has known it. And most modern home gardeners have either never heard it or have heard the wrong version of it. Today I am going to walk you through the whole thing. The 2 kinds of tomato plants, how to tell which kind you have, how to prune each kind properly, what to take and what to leave, when to do it, the small tools and habits, and the one final cut you make at the end of the season that turns hard, green tomatoes into ripe, red ones in the last weeks before frost. This is not theory. This is the same way I have pruned tomatoes for the last 40 years, in the same way my father did before me. I will be honest with you about the bold word in the title. Folks will tell you maximum yield. The plain truth is that careful pruning gives you more fruit, healthier plants, and a longer harvest, and that is what we are after. Not a record-breaking yield from a single plant, a steady, larger, healthier harvest from every plant in your patch year after year with less disease. That is the honest math. Quick word before we go on. The old methods my family uses, too much of it to fit in any one video. I have put the whole of it together in a comprehensive guide. If you want the long version, that is where it is. I will not mention it again. Now let me show you how it is done. Let me first tell you about the 2 kinds of tomato plants because the pruning is completely different for each kind. And if you prune the wrong way on the wrong kind, you will reduce your harvest instead of growing it. When you buy your tomato plants in spring, whether from the seed catalog, the nursery, or the seed packet, the label will tell you one of 2 words, determinate or indeterminate. These are the 2 great families of tomatoes, and the difference comes down to how they decide to stop growing. A determinate tomato, also called a bush tomato, knows when to stop. It grows to about 4 or 5 ft tall, sets all its flower clusters in a short window of time, ripens all its fruit at more or less the same time over 2 or 3 weeks, and then finishes. The plant is done. This is the kind to grow if you want a heavy harvest all at once for canning. My family fills 2 dozen jars of tomato sauce in a single weekend from our determinate plants, and the kind to grow if your garden is small. Common determinate varieties include Roma, San Marzano, Celebrity, Bush Beefsteak, and most of the paste tomatoes. An indeterminate tomato, also called a vining tomato, does not know when to stop. It keeps growing all season, putting out new flowers and new fruit continuously, getting taller and bushier until the first frost finally kills it. In a long, warm season, a single indeterminate plant can climb to 8 or 10 ft and produce 100 or more tomatoes spread out from July through October. This is the kind to grow if you want fresh slicing tomatoes all summer for the table, sandwiches, salads, and giving away to the neighbors. Common indeterminate varieties include Brandywine, Cherokee Purple, Beefsteak, most heirloom varieties, and most cherry and grape tomatoes. How to tell which kind you have when the label is gone. Look at the plant in midsummer. If the very top tip of the main stem has formed into a flower bud with no leaf growth above it, that is a determinate plant. It has reached its end and is putting all its energy into setting fruit. If the main stem keeps putting out new leaves at the top and shows no sign of stopping, that is an indeterminate plant. It is still growing. Both kinds get pruned, but they get pruned very differently, and getting them mixed up costs you the harvest. Now let me tell you the anatomy of a tomato plant, because once you know the parts, the pruning is plain. The main stem is the vertical trunk that runs up through the center of the plant. On a young plant, it is small and tender. On a mature plant, it is thick, woody, and the size of your thumb. Leaves branch off the main stem at regular intervals. Each leaf is a small energy factory gathering sunlight and turning it into the fuel the plant uses to grow and to fill its fruit. Leaves are good. You want most of them. Flower clusters also branch off the main stem at the joints, usually starting about a foot up from the soil, and these flower clusters become the tomatoes. You want all the flower clusters? Never cut a flower cluster. And then there is the part of the plant that causes most of the trouble, the sucker. A sucker is a small new shoot that grows out of the angle where a leaf meets the main stem, the armpit of the plant, you might call it. Suckers are not leaves, and they are not flower clusters. They are entire new branches the plant is trying to grow, a whole second tomato plant trying to start at the side of the first one. If you leave a sucker alone, it grows into a full secondary stem with its own leaves, its own flower clusters, its own suckers, and its own competition with the main stem for water, food, and sun. Identify a sucker by looking at the V-joint where a leaf meets the main stem. If there is a small new shoot growing out of that V-joint at about a 45-degree angle with tiny leaves of its own, that is a sucker. On a young plant, the suckers are small and soft, and you can pinch them off with your fingers. On an older plant, they are tough and woody, and you need a clean, small shear to cut them. The whole of tomato pruning is knowing which suckers to take and which to leave, depending on the kind of plant you have. Pruning a determinate tomato. This is the easy one, just a small amount of work. A determinate plant has a fixed amount of growth. It is going to reach its size, set its flowers, and stop. If you cut suckers off above the first flower cluster, you are cutting off potential fruit-bearing branches that the plant needs. So you want to leave most of the plant alone. Here is the rule for determinate tomatoes. Find the first flower cluster on the main stem, usually about a foot to a foot and a half up from the soil, and take off only the suckers that grow below it. Why those bottom suckers? Because they are the ones closest to the soil, where the disease lives. Septoria leaf spot, early blight, and other tomato diseases live in the soil and splash up onto the lower leaves and lower stems whenever you water or rain hits the ground. The lower a leaf or sucker is, the more likely it is to get infected. By removing the lowest 6 or 7 suckers, you raise the canopy of the plant up off the soil and give the air room to circulate. The plant breathes better. The lower leaves dry off faster after rain. The disease has a much harder time taking hold. There is one small exception worth knowing. Agricultural researchers have studied this carefully. The single sucker just below the first flower cluster is unusually strong, and that one is worth keeping because it will develop into a heavy secondary fruit-bearing branch. Take all the lower suckers, but leave the strong one right below the first flower cluster. You will get a noticeable bump in your harvest, and that is all you do to a determinate plant. Take the lower 6 or 7 suckers below the first flower cluster, Leave the strong one just below and let the rest of the plant grow how it wants. Heavy pruning of a determinate plant reduces your harvest. Light pruning of the bottom is exactly enough. Pruning an indeterminate tomato. This is the bigger job. An indeterminate plant will keep growing forever if you let it. Left alone, it becomes a tangled jungle by August. A great green mass, 8 ft tall, with 200 suckers each, trying to be its own plant. The inner canopy dark and humid, perfect conditions for disease. And the fruit you do get is small because the plant has spread its energy across too many growing points. The principle with indeterminate tomatoes is to choose how many main stems you want and stick with that. The traditional choices are single leader, double leader, or triple leader. Single leader. One main stem, every sucker removed, all the energy of the plant focused on that one stem. Largest individual fruits, easiest to stake and tend, slightly smaller total harvest. This is what greenhouse tomato growers do because it is most efficient for vertical space. Double leader. You let one strong sucker, usually the one just below the first flower cluster, same as on the determinate, grow into a second main stem. 2 stems, larger total harvest than single leader. Fruits still good size, easier to support than a multi-stem plant. This is what most careful home gardeners do and what I do most years. Triple leader, 3 main stems, largest total harvest, fruits slightly smaller, harder to support, more crowding. For folks with sturdy, strong cages and lots of space, choose your number and stick with it. Then once a week, walk the row and find every new sucker that has appeared in the V-joints. Take them all except the ones you chose to keep as additional leaders. The small tools and the right habits, a few words about doing it well. Pinch young suckers with your fingers when they are small, a few inches long or less. The plant heals quickly from a pinch. Take it between your thumb and forefinger and gently break it off sideways. Cut larger suckers with clean, sharp shears. When a sucker is more than a few inches long and has gone woody, pinching tears the stem. Use small garden shears, sharpened and wiped clean with a rag dipped in rubbing alcohol or vinegar between plants. Tomatoes carry disease from plant to plant on dirty shears, which is the #1 mistake I see folks make. A clean tool prevents an infected plant from infecting the next one. Prune in the morning of a dry, sunny day. Never in damp weather, never in the evening. The wounds dry over within an hour in the sun and the wind, and the chance of disease entering the cut is much smaller. Wet weather pruning is how you spread blight through your whole patch in one afternoon. Also, remove the lower leaves as the plant grows up. Once the plant is 2 or 3 feet tall, cut off any leaves that are touching the ground or close to it. These are the leaves that get hit by soil-borne disease, and they shade out the soil where you could otherwise plant lettuce, herbs, or compact garden plants. The plant breathes better with a clear lower canopy. Before I show you the final cut at the end of the season, let me pause for a moment. Watching these videos will give you ideas, but inside our gardening community, we help you turn those ideas into real household habits. You get courses, challenges, and direct access to ask questions about your own home garden. Now the final cut, topping the indeterminate at the end of the season, the hard one. In the last weeks of summer when the nights are turning cool and the first frost is a few weeks away, your indeterminate tomato plant is still trying to grow. It is putting out new flowers, setting new tiny green tomatoes, sending up new growth at the top. And not one of those late flowers and tiny green tomatoes has time to ripen before the frost will kill them. Every bit of energy the plant spends on new growth in those last weeks is energy stolen from the green tomatoes already on the vine that could ripen if the plant would just stop. So you stop it for the plant, you cut the top off. This is called topping, and it is the opposite of everything you have been doing all summer. About 3 to 4 weeks before your expected first frost date, take your clean shears and cut off the very top of every indeterminate tomato plant, the growing tip plus any new flower clusters that have appeared in the last week or two. Cut hard. Take a foot off the top if you have to. You are not being cruel. You are telling the plant the growing season is over. Ripen what you have. The plant responds within days. All the energy it was using to grow up now flows into the unripe fruit already on the vine. The green tomatoes you thought would never ripen begin to turn pink, then red. Many of the smaller green tomatoes that would have been wasted now ripen in time for the frost. A topped indeterminate in late September can ripen 20 or 30 extra tomatoes that would have been lost otherwise. That is the final cut. Hard, late, and worth more than you would believe. One small extra trick, the propagation of the suckers. This is a small gift the tomato gives you, and most folks do not know about. A tomato sucker pinched off in early summer, when the plant is still putting on growth, can be planted in soil or set in a glass of water, and it will root and become a new tomato plant. Same variety, same vigor, free. The reason it works is that the tomato stem has the ability to grow roots anywhere along its length, what the botanists call totipotency, but what I call one of God's small gifts to the tomato grower. Bury the sucker end deep in damp soil in a small pot. Keep it warm and shaded for a few days, and within 2 weeks, you have a young tomato plant ready to set out. In warm climates with a long growing season, you can plant the sucker right back into the garden and get a second crop from a single mother plant. In cooler climates, you can use suckers to start tomato plants for next year's seedlings, or to give a young tomato plant to a neighbor or grandchild who wants to start their own garden. Free plants all summer long from the things you would have thrown away anyway. Now I want to take a moment because here is where it all comes together. Look at what we have just walked through. 2 kinds of tomato plants and a different pruning strategy for each. Small, careful cuts that turn a 30 LOB plant into a 50 or 60 LOB plant. Lower leaves removed to keep disease off the canopy. Clean tools to keep one plant from infecting the next. Morning timing to dry the wounds. The final cut at the end of the season that ripens 20 or 30 extra tomatoes per plant. And the small gift of free new plants from the suckers you pinch off. This is not theory. This is the same way my mother pruned her tomatoes and her mother before her. Agricultural extension offices have studied the same methods in modern controlled trials and confirmed every part of it. The bottom sucker removal for disease prevention, the strong sucker below the first flower cluster as worth keeping. The morning timing, the topping at end of season. The old folks knew it by feel. The university folks now know it by science. The methods line up. There is no money in the seed industry in teaching folks to prune their tomatoes carefully because a careful pruner gets a longer harvest from fewer plants, which means buying fewer plants the next year. There is a great deal of money in selling 50 seedlings to a family who would only need 10 if they pruned well. So the knowledge sits in the older gardens passed from mother to daughter, and a whole country grows beautiful green, bushy tomato plants that produce half what they could. You can be the one who remembers the old way. So here is what I want you to do. This week, walk out to your tomato patch and check the label on each plant, or look at the top of the main stem if the label is gone. Determinate or indeterminate. Determine which kind you have on each plant. For the determinate plants, find the first flower cluster. Remove the suckers below it except for the strongest one just below the cluster, and leave the rest of the plant alone. For the indeterminate plants, choose how many leaders you want, 1, 2, or 3, and remove all other suckers as they appear. Pinch the small ones with your fingers. Cut the larger ones with clean shears in the morning of a dry day. For all the plants, take off any leaves touching the ground, every one of them. 3 or 4 weeks before your first frost, top the indeterminate plants hard and let them ripen what they have. And when you find a healthy sucker too big to pinch, do not throw it on the compost pile. Put it in a pot of soil, keep it damp, and in 2 weeks you will have a free new tomato plant ready for the kitchen garden of a neighbor, a grandchild, or yourself the next year. Tell me in the comments below which kind of tomatoes are you growing this year, and have you been pruning them, and how is the harvest? And what variety of tomato is the one your family has always grown, the one your mother or grandmother loved best? Share the variety, share the region, share the story. I read every single one. Next time, we will look at the old ways of canning and preserving the harvest, the jars, the boiling water bath, the seasonings, and the small habits that turn a heavy summer harvest into pantry shelves full of red sauce, stewed tomatoes, and salsa that feed the family all winter. Until then, walk the rows, find the suckers, pinch with respect, and trust that the plant grows better fruit when you take a careful hand to it. That is how the old folks did it. That is how it is still done in any kitchen garden that remembers. If this story changes the way you look at the growth in your garden, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history and wisdom they tried to bury. Plant the future with us. The next treasure of knowledge will be opened soon.